You used to run up the stairs without thinking. Now, every step feels like a negotiation with pain one wrong move. And your knee reminds you just how fragile it's become. You tell yourself it's a. But deep down, something doesn't add up. Because you're not just getting older. You're losing the very thing your joints depend on: collagen. And no one warned you it could feel like this. That your legs would swell like balloons after a walk. That sitting down would be the easy part, and standing up the hardest. But what if your body isn't broken? What if it's just underfed? There's a reason the stiffness shows up quietly and doesn't leave. And there's a reason so many seniors think it's too late to reverse it. But Margaret proved them wrong. There's one thing she changed, just one simple shift. And in 8 weeks, her knees no longer screamed every morning, not from a pill, not from surgery, but from food, real food. And what happened next changed everything. Margaret used to walk 5 miles every morning. She called it her thinking time. Past the church, across the little bridge near her home in Ohio, she knew every crack in the sidewalk like the back of her hand. But now, even getting out of bed feels like a chore. These stairs, a mountain. Her knees swell before noon. And every evening, she finds herself massaging her legs, just to fall asleep. She doesn't remember when it started exactly. But somewhere between 64 and 68, her body stopped listening. The strength, the bounce in her steps, vanished like a light dimming slowly until she could barely see the outline of the woman she used to be. She tried heating pads, joint creams, anti-inflammatory pills, but nothing lasted, and she wondered, is this how it ends? Not with a diagnosis, but with the slow erosion of independence, no warning, no fight. Just less of everything she once took for granted. Her daughter offered to buy her a cane. Her grandson stopped asking her to join walks at the park. That hurt more than the knees ever did. She began to feel invisible, as if the world had moved on and left her behind with legs too swollen to follow. But something inside her wasn't ready to give up because somewhere deep down, she didn't believe the pain was inevitable. She believed her body was still trying to speak to her, and maybe, just maybe, she hadn't been listening the right way. So she asked a new question, not, what's wrong with me? But what is my body missing? And that was the beginning of everything changing. Margaret sat with a notebook in her lap, her pen hovering over a blank page. She had written down every symptom: pain, stiffness, swelling. But what caught her attention that day was a single phrase she read online. By age 65, your body produces less than half the collagen it needs. She blinked. Collagen wasn't that just for skin creams and magazine ads, but the more she dug, the clearer it became. Collagen wasn't just for vanity. It was the scaffolding of her body, the glue in her joints, the cushion in her knees, the silent ally that had been disappearing with every birthday candle she blew out. She remembered how, 5 years ago, standing up didn't make her knees crack like old furniture. And now she could feel her bones grinding if she moved the wrong way. It wasn't just age, it was absence. A quiet loss, and no doctor had warned her about it. They prescribed pills, offered surgeries, but never asked about her kitchen. No one mentioned that collagen could be fed, that it could be rebuilt. Margaret realized she hadn't been broken. She had been starving. Her body hadn't given up. It had been waiting for her to supply the building blocks it could no longer make on its own, and collagen was the missing ingredient. She looked around her kitchen differently that week. Eggs, seeds, broth. They weren't just food anymore. They were tools, not magic, but matter. Real, edible repair. It wasn't about swallowing supplements in desperation. It was about returning to nourishment, to the kind of eating that gave her body a reason to repair itself. She had always believed in healing. She just never knew it could start in her fridge. If you've ever opened your pantry and thought, what if the answer is right here? You're not alone, and neither was Margaret. Because her next step started with something she hadn't touched in years. The eggs sat quietly in her fridgy brown shelled. Unassuming, Margaret had avoided them for years. Too much cholesterol. They said stick to the whites. They said, but now, things were different. She wasn't chasing perfect numbers on a lab sheet anymore. She was chasing mornings without wincing. So she cracked one open hole, let the golden yolk slide gently into the pan's soft heat. Olive oil, low and slow, she watched the yolk tremble slightly. Alive, intact as she hadn't realized it then, but that yellow center was more than just food. It was fuel, biotin, sulfur, vitamin D, not direct collagen. But the spark her body needed to make its own. She didn't expect a miracle. But after 2 weeks of soft-cooked eggs for breakfast, she noticed the stairs didn't feel as brutal. Her knees didn't groan as loud. When she stood up from the couch by week 5, something strange happened. She caught herself humming in the kitchen. It was a tiny thing. But for Margaret, it meant movement no longer came with dread, and the study she found later, it only confirmed what she already felt. Adults over 60 who added eggs, whole eggs, to their breakfast 5 days a week reported a 22% drop in joint discomfort, not from magic, but from micronutrients supporting the chains that collagen needed to form. It wasn't just her knees healing. It was trust that her body could still rebuild if she gave it the right material, and that maybe, just maybe, eating the whole egg wasn't the villain she'd once believed. She told her daughter, her doctor, even her neighbor Lucy, who still scrambled everything to death. Overcook it, she said, grinning, keep the yolk alive. Because in that soft golden center, Margaret found something she hadn't tasted in a long time: hope, and the courage to keep going, to try the next thing, the one she'd always seen as bird food, not medicine. It started with a handful pumpkin seeds. From a little bag her granddaughter brought over during movie night, Margaret hadn't thought much of them. They were crunchy, plain, something kids snacked on while scrolling their phones, but that night, she tried a few: salty, earthy, oddly satisfying. The next morning, she saw the half-empty bag on the counter, and a thought flickered. What if she looked them up? Magnesium, zinc, manganese, not collagen themselves, but the silent sparks that help build it. It was like discovering that screws, nails, and glue were just as vital as the wood. Without them, structure falls apart. Without minerals, collagen breaks before it's built. She read about a study. Seniors who ate a quarter cup daily reported better flexibility, less swelling in the ankles, more ease stepping off curbs, and it made sense. Her legs hadn't just been aching, they'd been asking, begging for what they needed to repair themselves. So she soaked the seeds overnight, added sea salt, dried them in the oven, and each day, she sprinkled them over her oatmeal. It became her new ritual, simple, silent, sacred. After 3 weeks, she noticed something subtle. Her ankles didn't puff up. By noon, she could slip on her shoes without wiggling them for 5 minutes. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real, and it came from something she'd once called rabbit food. Now, she saw those seeds as soldiers, tiny, powerful, and working overtime on her behalf. And the best part, she didn't have to change her whole diet. Just one small handful, made consistently. So if you've ever looked at something ordinary and wondered if it could make a difference, remember this: sometimes the things we overlook are quietly fighting for us right under our noses and between our teeth. Margaret had no idea the next food on her list would come from a tin can and a childhood memory she hadn't tasted in decades. The can hissed softly as she peeled it open, a familiar scent, sharp, salty, almost metallic. Canned salmon. Margaret hadn't touched it in years. It reminded her of her mother. A Friday night ritual, mashed with mayo, spread on toast, served with dill pickles. Back then, she didn't know it was special. She just knew it felt like comfort. Now, decades later, she looked at the soft bones inside the tiny, pale cylinders mixed in with the pink flakes. And for the first time, she didn't throw them out, she mashed them in, just like her mother used to. And as she took her first bite, warm from the skillet, layered on whole grain toast, a memory stirred: the simplicity, the strength, the science. Those bones weren't just leftovers. They were collagen, calcium, gelatin, omega-3s, not from a capsule, from a fish that gave her everything in one humble can. She read the studies later. 3 servings a week, a 32% improvement in knee flexibility, less inflammation, less fluid pooling in the joints. And all from something shelf-stable and affordable. No fancy prep, no supplements, just the whole food, eaten whole. She started experimenting, adding it to rice bowls with herbs, mashing it into avocado for lunch each time, feeling less like a patient, more like a person reclaiming her own care. By week 6, she could walk the entire grocery aisle without leaning on the cart. That might sound small, but to Margaret, it felt like flight, and what mattered most wasn't the science. It was the story. That her mother, all those years ago, may have known something she didn't. That healing doesn't always come in prescriptions. Sometimes, it comes in remembering where we came from and honoring what we used to know now every time she opens a can. She smiles because inside is more than just fish, it's freedom, packed in water and sealed tight. And up next came a food she used to feel guilty for loving until she realized it might just love her joints back. It crackled in the pan, golden crisp, just the way she remembered. Chicken skin. Margaret used to peel it off, fold it into a napkin, toss it aside. She'd been told it was the enemy, too greasy, too sinful, too dangerous. But now, with every bite, she tasted rebellion, a soft defiance against decades of fear around food. She had read something curious, that the very collagen her joints were starving for was tucked inside that skin-type collagen. The kind found in cartilage, ligaments, the very structure holding her knees together. And suddenly, that crispy piece wasn't indulgence, it was medicine. She started buying skin-on chicken thighs, roasting them slowly, letting the skin bubble and brown. She didn't drench it in oil, she honored it. She treated it with care, like a gift. Her first meal was quiet, no TV, no distractions, just her, a fork, and the sound of skin cracking gently between her teeth. At 3 weeks in, something changed. Getting up from her reading chair no longer required a push from both arms. Her ankles didn't wobble after a short walk to the mailbox. She was more stable, more sure, and, oddly, more at peace. Because healing wasn't coming from willpower. It came from permission to enjoy again, to trust food again, to release guilt and replace it with gratitude. She told her friend Ellen, who still scraped her skin into the trash. "You're throwing out the strongest part," she said, smiling. And for what? Old advice. Because sometimes, the wisdom we need isn't new, it's just been buried under fear. And when Margaret bit into that golden crisp, again she didn't taste fat, she tasted a future with fewer pills, fewer appointments, and more meals that felt like nourishment, not punishment. But healing wasn't just about what she added. It was also about what she allowed herself to enjoy again, and that joy would lead her to something even softer, something that wobbled in the bowl, but steadied her from the inside out. It looked strange at first, gelatin, wobbly, translucent, almost too quiet to trust. Margaret stirred the powder into warm tea, unsure. It wasn't her usual routine. She missed her morning coffee, the jolt, the heat, the noise of it. But something about this new ritual felt intentional. Like she was giving her body a hug from the inside out. She chose unflavored, grass-fed gelatin, no sugar. No colors, just collagen in its simplest form, and each sip was an offering, a message to her knees, her ankles, her hips. "I haven't forgotten you," she'd read the studies. 6 weeks, 37% improvement in mobility, a real physical thickening of cartilage seen on MRI scans. Margaret didn't need the scans, she had stares, and slowly, those stares stopped feeling like punishment. She stopped gripping the railing with fear, stopped avoiding the second floor at night, and started reclaiming her home. One step at a time. She even made gummies one weekend with her granddaughter, orange juice, a hint of honey, laughter in the kitchen. Healing didn't have to be bitter, sometimes it came with giggles and sticky fingers. By week 4, the swelling in her knees didn't show up after walks. She noticed she wasn't reaching for the ibuprofen anymore, not out of willpower, but because she didn't need to. Her body felt held, supported, for the first time in years, and the cup she once hesitated to sip, it became sacred, a pause in the morning. A moment to say, "I believe in my own repair." If you've ever felt that shift, the one that happens so slowly you almost miss it, let it land. That's your body answering back, and the next answer, it came in a tin again. One she nearly refused, until she learned the power inside the skin and the bones of the humblest little fish. She wrinkled her nose the first time. The smell hit her before the can was fully open sardines. Margaret had always avoided them, too fishy, too strong, too much. But her daughter insisted. Just try it with avocado on toast. She'd said so, reluctantly. She did mashed it gently, bones and all, spread it across warm bread. Added lemon, a little salt, a dash of courage. Anne took a bite. It wasn't love at first taste, but it was something else: intrigue, curiosity. Hope. She read that sardines, when eaten whole, skin and bones included, were packed with type I collagen, the exact kind her joints needed. The same structure her knees had been begging for. She gave it a week. 3 servings, then 2 weeks. By the end of the third, something had shifted. Her knees didn't swell after gardening. Her ankles felt steadier on uneven pavement. She didn't feel like her legs would give out on the grocery store tile. And it wasn't just about the fish, it was about the layers, the omega-3s easing inflammation. The elastin in the skin supporting tissue elasticity. The calcium in the bones rebuilding strength from the inside, all in one compact package. No prep required. Just a fork, a squeeze of lemon, and trust. She started keeping cans in her pantry. For travel, for picnics, for days she needed something fast and healing. The girl who once cringed at sardines now craved them, and in that shift she realized something powerful. The foods we avoid often hold the parts of us we're scared to restore: strength, stability, possibility. She told her neighbor George, who limped every morning with the mail. Try the ones in olive oil, she said. They smell less scary and feel like medicine. Because healing doesn't always taste sweet. Sometimes it's briny, bold, and exactly what your body has been asking for. And the next thing Margaret reached for, it didn't come in a can. It simmered for hours and carried with it every story her bones had ever wanted to tell. It became her evening ritual. 9 p.m. sharp. The house quiet, the lights low. Margaret stood at the stove, ladling warmth into a muggy bone broth, golden, fragrant, gently steaming, not just soup, not just comfort, but liquid collagen, simmered from bones, tendons, marrow. The first time she made it, she wasn't sure what to expect: chicken backs, apple cider vinegar, onions, and herbs. She let it bubble low for 18 hours, and when she strained it, it glowed like amber in her hands. She took a sip, rich, deep, grounding. It felt like coming home to herself, to her strength, to everything her joints had quietly been missing. Within 2 weeks of sipping it nightly, she noticed she was sleeping deeper, waking with less stiffness. Her knees didn't lock when she stood. Her fingers didn't swell after writing letters. By week 6, the creaky feeling in her hips began to fade. She didn't just feel relief, she felt supported, like every tendon and ligament had been seen and soothed. The science made sense. Glycine, proline, gelatin, minerals pulled from bone into broth. Collagen, not in supplement form, but in a form her body recognized, absorbed, trusted. The studies confirmed it. 44% less joint swelling, improved mobility, cartilage thickness, actually increasing on ultrasound. But Margaret didn't need a scan. She had proof in motion, in the way she bent to tie her shoes, in how she knelt in the garden without bracing for pain, in how she carried the laundry upstairs. Instead of asking for help, she even started using the broth to cook her rice, her vegetables, each meal a quiet act of healing. Her home smelled like rosemary, garlic, and something else: a belief she wasn't fixing her body, she was feeding it. And every warm mug was a reminder. She was still capable of care, still worthy of restoration, still healing. And that healing would soon become something even stronger, something that didn't just soothe, it rebuilt, completely, from the tendons up. It started with a recipe she found in the back of an old cookbook: slow-simmered beef tendon stew. She hesitated. Tendons? Weren't those the chewy bits everyone picked around? But the research was clear: tendons were almost pure collagen, the very type her body craved. A type I, the structural kind. The kind that builds cartilage, supports ligaments, restores joint fluid, So she went to the butcher, asked for beef tendons. He raised an eyebrow. Making something special? She nodded, just trying to move like myself again. She simmered them for 12 hours with ginger, garlic, a splash of vinegar until they turned soft, jelly-like, almost translucent. She added vegetables, a bit of broth, and let it all melt together. The first spoonful surprised her. Rich, sticky, comforting in a way that felt ancient, and over the next 4 weeks, something shifted. She noticed the difference when she stepped off the porch. Her knees no longer buckled from underneath. She didn't wince going down steps. The cushion, the glide, the strength. It had returned, not completely, but enough to walk without thinking. Enough to dance in the kitchen with her granddaughter, enough to laugh when she realized she just climbed the stairs twice. Without her cane. The study she read afterward confirmed it. 63% improvement in joint fluid density, regrowth of soft tissue, visible on MRI, not from surgery. From stew. From collagen that had cooked into healing with every simmered hour. She shared the recipe with her neighbor. Left a bowl on George's doorstep, told Ellen over tea that the secret was in the simmer, not the spice. And one morning, she walked through the park, no cane, no limp, just the sun on her back and her grandson's hand in hers. He looked up and smiled. "You're fast again, Grandma." She laughed, not fast, maybe, but free. And in that moment, Margaret knew her journey wasn't about reversing time. It was about returning to power, to joy, to a body that wasn't broken, just waiting for the nourishment it always deserved. And if you've made it this far, maybe your story is ready too. Because healing doesn't start with hope, it starts with food, with fuel, with belief, and maybe your next step is just one bite away.